This woman in her 30s, she smells like a virgin. The tramp couldn't help but come closer. He's intoxicated by her scent. Suddenly there was a bang. The man at the door was shot in the head. The pedestrians on the street started to run in all directions. The people in the pub were scared out of their wits. They looked through the glass. They saw that the man's body was still shaking. He might be saved. But no one would go out to help. Only the cleaner of the pub defied the crowd. He ripped open the door, but there was another bullet. And the cleaner was shot in the head. Now no one dares to go out again. They're screaming like birds of a feather and ducking for cover inside the pub. They're looking for cover inside the pub. When there was no sign of movement outside, they turned on the TV to get some information. But it was all the same. There was not a single news report of the shooting in the city center. When they were all at a loss, the fat lady turned round to find a horrifying sight. The two bodies that had just been shot. Even the bloodstains had been cleaned up. How can this be? Could it be Javier? People are starting to speculate. Some say it's bandits out there. Some say it's the police. Some say it's aliens. And that's when it happened. The man in the sober suit, he came up with a sensational idea. He thinks that the shooter wasn't necessarily outside the bar. It could be inside the bar. Maybe there's a terrorist among them. He was carrying a high-risk weapon. That's why the government dispersed the crowd and shut it down and isolate the bar completely. Speaking of which, the bearded man's face seems to show a hint of nervousness and secretly hid his bag. The man in the suit noticed this scene. He went straight to question him. The crowd also swarmed up, took the parcel and opened it. Inside, there were only clothes and a hard drive. There's nothing wrong with the clothes. Is there something wrong with the hard drive? Without waiting for the bearded man to explain, the blonde grabbed the hard drive and threw it to the ground. Then she stomped on the hard drive and smashed it to pieces. This enraged the mustache guy. If you think there's something wrong with the bag, what about the briefcase at the bar? It's the same as the briefcase at the bar. The briefcase happened to belong to the man in the suit. When questioned by the crowd, the man in the suit explained, "There's nothing in the briefcase, but if you want to open it, you can't." They argued and fought. Then the bald man suddenly pulled out a gun. Turns out he's a retired cop. Just when things were at a standstill, the homeless man suddenly grabbed the briefcase. He opened the lock. "I didn't realize it wasn't a high-risk weapon, but women's underwear." It's hard to see how a man in a suit can be so glamorous on the outside. Inside, he's such a flirt. Suddenly there was a sharp knock on the door to break the awkwardness. It came from the bathroom. Open the bathroom door. A fat man passed out with his face in the toilet bowl. No one dares to come forward, but the blonde woman bends down to check it out. He found a large syringe next to the fat man. He found bright red blood coming out of his ear. At the same time, a police car pulled up in front of the pub. The crowd thought they were saved. They leaned over the glass and screamed for help. But the officers seemed oblivious. They just put tires around the bar. They set them on fire. And then the news about the pub came on the telly. But it said there was a fire in the city center. Police and firefighters were trying to keep order. This is the opposite of what happened. And then something even more bizarre happened. The fat man who had just collapsed in the bathroom has come up behind them. This man has a swollen face. The eyeballs are bulging and the pupils are sunken. Blood oozes from his ears and runs down his neck. He gasps for air and loses his balance. He fell to the ground with a thud. It turns out the man was an army captain. He was infected by a virus. The syringe was probably the source of the virus. The whole pub is now isolated. The government has closed the roads and the news. Everyone's mobile phone signal has been blocked. The captain's satellite phone is our only hope. Everyone's rushing to use the captain's phone. Only the lady owner is avoiding it. He says the reason the government is doing this to them. He said the reason the government was treating them so badly was because the virus was so infectious. That's why anyone who turns over a body, the person who took the mobile phone, could have been infected by the virus. According to his theory, only the police, the man in the suit, and the lady boss are safe. The crowd was in an uproar. In order to ensure that they are not infected, the three women bosses have joined forces. The police pointed their guns at the others. They ordered them to take the bodies and go to the basement. They had no choice but to hide in the basement. The basement is damp and cold, and the air is thin. Under the extreme tension, the fat lady's breathing is getting out of balance. He slapped the door to get out. In the process, he broke the bottles of wine he was hoarding. That's why Brother Beard made a big discovery. The wine spilled on the floor didn't gather, turning over the cardboard. It turned out that there was a sewer underneath. Is this a way out? The sewer is full of dirt. Everyone avoided it, but the homeless man didn't care. After all, Compared to the two, they're both better than each other, and greased up and pushed into the sewers, but the caliber of the sewer was too small. He's stuck in the center. The bearded man put his foot on his shoulder to help him, but he couldn't move. And what's even more devastating, he's like a turnip stuck in the dirt. He couldn't even be pulled out. At that moment, shots were fired from upstairs. The bartender heard someone enter the bar. Whoever came in not only killed the 3 people upstairs, they set the bar on fire. The flames were raging. There was smoke. The basement was a dead end. Is now a safe house, but the confined space can't provide much oxygen, only by dragging the homeless man up to connect the air between the basement and the sewers. So the man pulls him up. The woman pulls him up by his armpits and finally uproots him. The oxygen-deprived fat lady is so agitated. She slaps her hand against the hot door. She falls to the ground with severe burns. In the basement, supplies are scarce. The blonde had to use oil to clean his wounds, and wrapped him in toilet paper. When the flames upstairs were out, the bearded man grabbed a broom and poked through the door. He was the first to find the hot pistol. He hid it in his waistband. The blonde is no slouch either. He opens the tray and finds his mobile phone, checking the text messages. That syringe wasn't a virus. It was a vaccine. The captain died from the virus because he injected it too late. The text message wasn't finished. He guessed that the captain had 4 more vaccines, so he searched his body. But to his surprise, the homeless man was the first to find the syringe containing the vaccine. So here's the problem. There were 5 people in the pub, but there were only 4 vaccines. One of them was bound to be eliminated. The hobo saw what was happening. He took a syringe and stuck it in his arm. The bearded man is furious. He pushed the homeless man against the wall, but he didn't realize that the tramp would be so ruthless. He bit the mustache guy's hand. He grabbed his gun. But this fight, the syringe fell to the basement, and the fat lady wrapped her hands. She couldn't stop picking it up, so the syringe slipped back into the sewer. That's the end of the game. No one can get a shot. They had to go through the sewer to retrieve the syringe, but it's a very small caliber. But the caliber of the sewer is small. To get through it, the thinnest of the homeless. Who else has failed? Now the crowd's attention to the women. This woman is being pushed with oil. The man spreads the oil all over his body. It's the only way he can get into the tiny tube. The woman is pushing down as hard as she can. She's stuck at the bottom, then the top. Luckily, with the help of the crowd, she was able to make it down. In the feces-laden sewage, he swam quickly to find the syringe and climbed to the shore. Then the bearded man ordered him to tie the syringe to a wire, but he refused. He didn't believe they would leave him one. In the face of the blonde's forceful refusal, the men in the basement had no choice. They had no choice but to break open the sewer by removing the iron pipe beside them. While they were at it, the blonde found an exit at a fork in the road. Soon after, bartender, tramp, the bearded man took off their clothes one by one and came through the sewer, covered in grease. The fat lady was the last. Her waist was bigger than the diameter of the entrance. She could only kick in the air, but the bartender stepped on their shoulders and pulled them down. But at that moment, the bearded man grabbed the homeless man, trying to take back the pistol. The homeless man is not willing to give up. The two fought in the sewage. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and the water gradually calmed down. The 3 men on the shore only saw the bearded man climbed up with his gun, but the hobo has disappeared. It seems he's already dead. The bearded man with the gun in his hand ordered the blonde to hand over the syringe. The blonde refuses. The blonde refuses and says she's hidden the syringe. If he shoots, everyone dies. The bearded man could do nothing. After an argument, the 4 of them continued on their way. At a corner, the fat lady suddenly went crazy. She pushed the bartender underwater. And held his head in her hands. So he wanted to kill the bartender. As long as he's missing, those who survive will get the vaccine. But the bartender didn't deserve to die. After a struggle, he was rescued. The bearded man aimed his gun at the fat lady, but he couldn't do it. Looking at the bartender's miserable state, the fat lady felt guilty. She took the mustache guy's gun and shot herself. Soon after, the 3 remaining men found the vaccine, but before they could inject it, they heard a strange noise not far away. They rushed over to see. It was the body of the fat lady, with coins over her eyes. Who did this? Before they could react, just heard a muffled sound. The bartender was knocked to the ground. It's the bum. He's still alive. Now he's going crazy. He's not just going to kill the bearded man. He's going to kill everyone. The bearded man and the blonde begin to run. The homeless man is in hot pursuit. They rush to the exit and climb the ladder. But desperately, in the heat of the moment, the blonde's syringe fell into the sewage. But the hobo had already caught up with him. He grabbed the bearded man's legs. The bearded man, seeing no hope of survival, he made a selfless gesture. The only time, he handed the woman his syringe. Finally, he hugged the homeless man and died with her. The water was rapidly turning red. Apparently, only the woman survived. In the end, she pushed her shoulder through the manhole cover and escaped. In the street, the woman's nakedness reeked. But still, kindly men approached her, and some passers-by offer their coats, but no one knows what he's been through. On the ground, people are used to talking to each other in masks, but underground, from the bar to the basement, from the basement to the sewers, the more human nature is revealed. The virus of reality may be eradicated by a vaccine, but the disease of humanity can last forever.